Hey, it's Ryan again. We've got another cider to do tasting with today, and this is somewhat of a repeat, but done a little bit differently than before. This is a single varietal Calville Blanc, and this style is a little bit different because we have a really interesting process behind how we make this one, and that's what I want to talk about today. So just real quick, the cider itself is dry but not bone dry, has some decent tannic structure but isn't bitter or astringent or sharp or anything like that, and also has some cool, interesting, citrusy, almost like orange juice notes. But what I want to talk to you about is the carbonation on this cider, and how that's related to process. So for most of our ciders and most kind of modern style ciders in general, they're force carbonated, which basically means you take CO2 and you pump it into a cold liquid, and it goes into a suspension. And that's how most beers are done. It's how Coca-Cola is done. It's really fast and it's really consistent, which is why it's chosen as a modern manufacturing technique. But CO2 is also a byproduct of natural fermentation. So there's another way to do it, whereby you try and capture that natural carbonation, which ends up a little bit different. It's slower, it's less consistent, but it gives you something a little bit different and a little bit cool. So this is a little different from the previous one because the way we make it is basically we suspend fermentation by turning on the refrigerant to our tanks. Yeast doesn't like it when it gets cold. So just when it gets close to the end of the fermentation, I shut the tank to try and keep all the CO2 in there. And I turn on our refrigerant, and then we just kind of see where it goes and when it stops. This is a little bit drier than previous iterations, has a low level of carbonation. It's not flat or still. The technical term is petillant, P-E-T-I-L-L-A-N-T, which is basically a really pretentious way of saying kind of a middling carb, a little bit lower in between like a still cider and a sparkling one, you might say. You also notice that it's got smaller bubbles of CO2 than the usual force carbonated cider. That's another trademark for this sort of natural style fermentation. It's almost like champagne at a lower level of carbonation. So I think that's really cool. I think it's a super tasty cider, really good, really refreshing for the heat that we're currently experiencing. So stop in, check it out, chat with your bartenders about it, and yeah, hope to hear from you guys soon.